Passport's a way for you to be able to bring in your customer onto the Access4 platform a bit faster than normal. So you don't have to wait for porting to happen. So that 4 to 6 week lead time that you have for a Cat C port, even 2 weeks for a Cat A, means you can move them across a lot faster. How it actually works is you put a diversion in from the carrier side. You can also put it in from the PBX. However, we do have a few requirements around what is being handed across from a header's perspective and what information we can get from that. And you put in a forward to a 1-800 number to our side. So the benefits of this is it means that you can control when the customer is moving across. If you have access to the losing platform, so that could be something like another Broadwork system, could be a on-prem PBX, and you're putting in forward, place that forward, or on the SIP trunks and going onto that on-prem PBX as well. If you can control that, it means that when you put in place that forward to that number on our side, that's when the customer cuts across. So there's no delays. You can control exactly when that happens. It means that if you need to do it outside of business hours or anything like that, or if your customer has downtime and you need it to occur because they're moving office or something along those lines, gives you that control. So you can control exactly when it cuts across. If you don't have that level of control across their system and you do have to raise it with the losing carrier, whether that's Optus or Telstra or anything like that, they can still do it for you. You just got to ask them, put on an exchange-based diversion, and that just gets, once again, to that 1-800 number on our side. From there, with those losing carriers, they may take a little bit more time to do it. I know Telstra has about a 4 or 5 day SLA to comply with these changes, so it can take a little bit more time, but it still gives you a bit of control around when. So if they're having downtime or something along those lines, you can call up, say it's an emergency, put in place that forward, and move them across. So it gives you a lot more control from that perspective, moves them across to our side. What that's actually doing on our side is we're routing those calls to the end user service. So you put in a porting request with us. When you do so, you say that you would plan on putting in place a Fastport or an EBD. We then add the numbers into that enterprise like normal. However, we do it earlier in the step. So normally there's a 3-day lead time between when putting in a port and when we put the numbers in there. This will usually happen the next business day. So a lot faster than you provision their call flow, whether it's just a single user to answer some calls if it's an emergency, or if it's full call flow, IVRs, call queues, whatever you need it to be. So you provision it like it needs to be. Real numbers put in place there. And then when you put in place that forward, we're looking at the headers and looking at where it's meant to route to. So we're detecting the number that was originally dialed. We see that in our system and we direct it to that end user. So from the end user's perspective, they're receiving that call as if it came directly to them. They don't see that forward. They're not seeing any diversion headers or anything like that. It looks like the call just came in. They're still seeing the original calling ID. So it's really useful if they're not noticing any difference. When they call out, the numbers are still not on our system, of course, but we will be masking their outbound calling line ID. So we're going to make it seem like they're calling from our system using their real numbers. So much the same in that case as well. So from an outbound perspective, it means they're still calling out their real numbers. You can do this on just a single number if you like. So if it's a primary number inside a real organization, that's what everyone calls. Great. You can just put in that place that number. Or if you want to put in place all of their numbers, so they have a 100 number range, every user has their own DID inside the platform, anything like that, you can put in place that forward on all of those users, and it means that every single user is going to be calling out as their real number. Redirections are happening for all of those numbers. Something to be aware of, some carriers will charge you, depending on how you put in place that redirection, around how many numbers could be how they charge. So some carriers will charge you how many calls are being redirected, some will charge you for how many numbers are being redirected. So if it's a 100 number range, could be quite costly. So let's give you that control around when they're coming across, giving the customer the ability to move to our system faster. They're not seeing any difference. Their numbers coming in, they're calling out as a real number. It seems like they've gone live with you. We're on the Access4 platform. So then what happens is that port, which is still in that pending status, you let us know that the EBD has been put in place, the redirection is working, customer's gone live inside our system, and then our porting team continues their process on the back end. So that port, which could be 4 for 6 weeks down the track, that's still going to occur like normal. There will still be that slight downtime when the port occurs, like you do expect with any port. However, you don't have to worry about making sure the call routing is correct or anything like that. Where once that port occurs, that EBD is taken off. It's just an automatic process, and then it's calling into our platform, you don't have to worry about changing numbers or anything like that. So much simpler. So it's almost like the customer went live 4 or 6 weeks before the port occurred in that aspect of things. I want to jump to the next slide there, John. So as I mentioned, around the bit of the process. So when activating it, you submit the port like normal. So you put in the port with our system. You do need to make sure that you select the exchange-based diversion and the import numbers options inside the porting process. That way our porting team know that you are putting in place that EBD, and we adding the numbers into your inventory straight away as well. Once you will get a notification from us, usually could be same business day, could be the next business day, saying the numbers have been added, and then you're good to configure all the services. So that's when you configure all the users, IVRs, aunt groups, call queues, whatever it needs to be. It does still work with things like faxing and things like that as well, still applicable. So those still work from that perspective as well. Once that's done, you reach out to the losing carrier, you provide them details saying you want to put in place an EBD, make sure that you provide them all the numbers that need to be redirected, and you give them either the 1-800 number, if they support it 1-800 number, most carriers will. Thing about the 1-800 number is reverse charge. So we're taking that cost from that perspective, much easier. They don't support the 1-800 number. We do have local numbers for each state as well, which you can redirect to, so keeping that cost down. Once that's in, if you call the number, you will get first calls in there. We'll receive a notification just saying, yes, if you've called from this number, exchange-based diversion is going to work, and then it will forward you to the correct location. So you will be notified saying EBD is working. If you call the number and you receive anything else, call into our TAC team or call into our support team and we can help troubleshoot what's going on. So there may be redirection headers are not coming through. We can see those from that side, or something else could be happening on the back end. Users not configured correctly, something like that. Our TAC team will be able to support you for that one. Once that's in place, all additional calls after that, after the first few, will not receive that message either. So it's just the first few that get that message, just letting you know that the forward's in place. And then you let our porting team know that, yep, everything's ready, services are activated, and they will continue with that porting process from there. You do that just from the porting case inside SaaSpost. There's just an option in there saying EBD activated, and then our porting team will continue with that process. If it's been a few days and we haven't received anything, our porting team will reach out to you to see if there's any assistance you require. So it is a quite easy process to get that up and running. It means that you don't have to worry about temporary numbers, removing them from the users, anything like that. It's a much easier, faster way of getting the customer cut across when needed.
It is really good for being able to projectize a project that you're bringing on board, because it means you can actually select the date when you want to do the migration. So you can select when you get the EBD on and then have that convert through and convert the client across, as opposed to waiting for porting dates, which can be problematic at times because you'll get rejections, things like that. But you can actually cut them over well before you're going to get the porting through. So we find that very useful for those type of things.